There's a silent truth about older folks that many avoid facing. It's not just about physical limitations or the aches and pains of aging, but something deeper, invisible to the hurried eyes of the modern world. It's about the soul. As the years go by, it doesn't weaken, fade away, or distance itself from who we are. On the contrary, the soul matures, sees with greater clarity, and begins to whisper truths that were once muffled by the rush of life. Sylvia Browne, known for her investigations into the human spirit, said that older people carry a unique consciousness, forged in decades of experiences, losses, reunions, and silences. They perceive what many have yet to name. They feel what others only suspect. There is a spiritual depth that intensifies with time, but few have the courage to hear what it wants to say, and even fewer are willing to talk about it with sincerity and respect. Many have become accustomed to seeing old age as a decline, a phase of farewells and absences. But Sylvia insisted on a different perspective. According to her, the soul of an older person is not on the verge of ending, but in the fullness of its wisdom. There is a strength there that observes the world calmly, that understands the value of time, and that has left behind the urge to prove something to someone. What's often lacking is someone to listen to that inner voice. That's why this video is different. It was made for you, who may have felt this silent presence within yourself and couldn't find the words to explain it. If this message has already touched something within you, consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. Not out of obligation, but to help us continue sharing reflections that value what is rarely said aloud. Sylvia believed that the soul of the elderly is like a living library, where each recorded memory is a page of learning for the spirit. While the body slows down, the interior awakens to larger questions, such as purpose, reconciliation, and transcendence. These are questions that arise in the silence of the night or in the quiet moments between visits. The soul wants to know if it lived with meaning, if it loved enough, if it forgave those it needed to, and above all, if it was true to itself. These questions don't come with fanfare, but with serenity, and they are what reveal the greatness of those who have aged consciously. In this process, the soul begins to release the weight it has carried for years. It frees itself from demands, detaches itself from the image that others have formed, and rediscovers its essence without fear of what's to come. What few people admit is that, as they grow older, many feel they are closer to who they really are. Masks fall more easily, appearances matter less, and the spirit allows itself to return to what it always was. It's not that the person changes, but that they allow themselves to be who they always were deep down. Sylvia called this a return to spiritual identity, not the one that was built by social roles or external expectations, but the one that has accompanied us since before birth. That's why many older people say that, even with advanced age, they feel more authentic. The body may be tired, but the gaze is steady, not out of stubbornness, but out of clarity. And this clarity, Sylvia said, is one of the greatest gifts of the mature soul. It's also true that this spiritual lucidity frightens those who haven't arrived there yet. For younger people, it's difficult to understand how someone can face death with serenity, or how it's possible to find beauty in old memories, even when they are shrouded in pain. But older people understand that time is a demanding teacher. It teaches you to let go of what doesn't return, to value what has remained, and to accept what cannot be changed. Sylvia said that this is wisdom of the soul, and that it doesn't come from books or speeches, but from living with reality. Those who have faced deep losses, illnesses, loneliness, or injustice and still preserve peace are connected to something that many don't even realize exists. It's this connection that few have the courage to name, and when this connection deepens, a new kind of silence arises, not the silence of abandonment or loneliness, but that of presence, a silence full of meaning, where the soul rests and observes. Sylvia said that this is the moment when the spirit begins to prepare for the transition, not as a tragic end, but as a return. Life, according to her, doesn't end with death. It merely changes form. And older people, even without knowing how to explain it, feel this. They feel that they are approaching something greater, that everything they have lived is about to make sense. This feeling isn't fear, it's a kind of recognition. As if, after so much time, The soul finally sees itself before what it has always sought, a reunion with itself, free of noise and external expectations. It's at this stage of life that many begin to revisit forgotten moments, not to lament, but to reorganize their own history. Sylvia said that the matured soul doesn't deny the past, it resignifies it. The joys gain more brilliance, and the pains cease to be open wounds to become respected scars. Each memory is observed with more compassion, including one's own mistakes. Judgment gives way to understanding. And in this process, the soul aligns itself with something greater, which no longer depends on external recognition or validation. The person realizes that true peace isn't in having done everything right, but in having lived with intention. And this completely transforms the way they see the life that remains. The time that once seemed short becomes valuable. Each gesture becomes more conscious. Each day takes on new meaning. Even with all this clarity, it's not always easy to express what one feels. Many older people end up keeping quiet, not for lack of will, but because they realize that few are really willing to listen attentively. Sylvia warned about this social silence, where the elderly are seen but rarely truly heard. It's a type of invisibility that hurts, because the soul remains active, reflective, present. But when there is no space for listening, what could be transmitted is lost. How many precious pieces of advice, how many transformative stories, how many profound perceptions remain guarded without being shared? The aging soul doesn't want to impose anything. It just wants to be respected. And when it finds someone who listens with an open heart, there's a glimmer that returns to the eyes. A glimmer of someone who knows they still have much to offer. Sylvia believed that the mission of those who grow old doesn't end with retirement or with leaving social prominence. It merely changes focus. The soul begins to exert another type of influence, more subtle but no less important. It's as if the elderly become guardians of collective memory, bearers of lessons that the modern world insists on ignoring. In a society that values speed and the new, the elderly are living reminders that there is wisdom in time, depth in silence, and value in pausing. When one listens attentively, it's possible to perceive that the soul of the elderly carries keys to questions that the younger generations haven't even begun to face. And this transmission doesn't happen by imposition, but by presence, by the way they look, how they listen, how they react in the face of difficulties. There's a silent lesson there. Even so, many are afraid of the proximity to the end. It's natural. Death, despite being part of life, is still a topic avoided by many. But Sylvia said that the aging soul has already begun this dialogue internally, not as a farewell, but as a serene preparation. She said that there is an invisible wisdom that manifests itself in the simplest gestures, in how someone looks at the sky, holds a cup, or closes their eyes for a few seconds in silence. These are moments that reveal a connection with something greater, with something that escapes common logic. The soul seems to know that it's approaching a crossing, and that's why it seeks lightness, seeks to resolve what was left pending, seeks to leave as little noise as possible, because deep down it wishes to depart in peace, with a serene heart and the story concluded with dignity. Some believe that the soul ages, that time wears it down as it happens with the body. But Sylvia said the opposite. For her, time reveals the true strength of the soul. Instead of weakening, it becomes clearer, more sensitive, more centered. And that's precisely why the last years of life can be the richest spiritually. When one looks back with honesty and forward with acceptance, something inside us reorganizes itself. The rush disappears, the fear dissolves, and what remains is presence. Presence in the now, in what can still be lived, in what can still be felt. The mature soul understands that there is still beauty, even if discreet. There is still meaning, even if different. There is still life, even if on another frequency. And that's not little. That's what's most true. Therefore, listening to an older person isn't just a gesture of respect. It's an act of wisdom. It's recognizing that there is more there than wrinkles and old memories. There is a soul in full expansion, full of insights that aren't found in books or on social media. Sylvia argued that each elderly person is a mirror that can show us what we may still take time to understand on our own. So the next time someone older says something apparently simple, listen carefully. There may be a deep truth there, which only someone who has lived a lot can translate into such direct words, and perhaps, by listening, we also transform a little. Perhaps the soul of the listener also awakens to something that was dormant, and so in this silent encounter, two generations recognize each other, not by age but by shared essence. In many cases, this exchange doesn't require grand speeches. A steady gaze, a pause before answering, a gesture of care. It's these small attitudes that reveal the maturity of the soul. Sylvia said that older people speak more with their presence than with their words, and that has a silent but profound power. It's not about convincing, it's about witnessing. And when you witness a soul at peace, something within us calms down too. Perhaps that's why so many grandchildren feel that their grandparents are a safe haven, even without knowing why. It's because they are in front of someone who has already gone through many storms, and even so chose to remain present. This type of strength cannot be taught. It is transmitted with time, with example, with the way of being in the world. Another issue that Sylvia frequently addressed was the feeling of uselessness that many older people carry. This happens because society, by focusing on productivity, forgets to value experience. But the soul doesn't measure value by results. It recognizes the importance of being, not just doing. And when someone older sees themselves as a burden, or as someone who no longer contributes, something breaks inside. Not out of vanity, but because this perception hurts their identity. That's why it's so important to remember that the soul never loses its value. Even without producing as before, it remains active, sensitive, capable of offering advice, emotional support, comforting stories. When an older person realizes that they are still useful, even if only by being there, something rekindles within them. It's also at this time of life that many people begin to reflect on forgiveness, not only what they have given to others, but what they need to give to themselves. Sylvia said that the soul doesn't want to depart carrying weight. It wants lightness. It wants clarity. And that's why the last years are often marked by internal reviews. Some write letters, others silence old grudges. Others simply accept what cannot be changed. This phase is an invitation to reconciliation, not with everyone necessarily, but with one's own story. It's as if the soul said, "I understood, I accepted, I moved on." And by doing so, it prepares not only for the end, but for what comes after. Because, according to Sylvia, life doesn't end with farewell. It continues on another plane, with new forms, but with the same essence. This vision brings comfort to those who listen attentively, thinking that the soul doesn't disappear, but only changes stage, changes the way one faces aging. Instead of fear, a sense of continuity arises. Instead of anguish, a serene curiosity. Sylvia said that the elderly who allow themselves to feel this live their last years with more tranquility, not because they ignore the challenges, but because they have already understood that existence goes beyond matter. This isn't imposed religiosity, but an internal intuition, something that many older people feel naturally, even without having exact words to describe it. It's a silent but strong perception, and whoever recognizes it lives differently. They live with more presence, more surrender, more peace in the face of uncertainties that previously seemed frightening. In this context, death ceases to be a taboo and becomes part of the process. Sylvia said that the real fear isn't of dying, but of not having lived authentically. That's why many older people seek, even at the end, a way to leave something meaningful. A piece of advice for a grandchild, a sincere conversation with a child, a gesture of reconciliation with someone from the past. These acts aren't random. They are movements of the soul that wants to close its cycle with wholeness. When this happens, it's as if the soul said, "Now I can go." Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was lived with awareness. And this awareness, this final lucidity, is what makes the last moments of life so valuable. They don't need ceremony. It's enough that they are respected with silence, listening, and presence. That's why Sylvia so strongly defended the importance of spiritually welcoming the elderly. It's not enough to take care of the body. It's necessary to recognize that there is an internal universe there that remains active until the last breath. When you look at an older person with this understanding, respect changes its level. It ceases to be just formality and becomes reverence, not for age, but for depth. The aging soul is a vast field, full of memories, wisdom, scars, and lessons. Ignoring this is wasting one of the greatest human heritages that exist. Therefore, whoever lives with someone older has a rare opportunity in their hands, the opportunity to learn from someone who has already walked many paths and, even so, kept alive the inner flame. A flame that doesn't go out with time. It merely changes form. This flame that persists until the end is the clearest proof that the soul doesn't wear out. It transforms. Sylvia said that, with time, the soul detaches from what is superfluous and focuses on the essential. And the essential, for those who have lived a lot, is usually simple. To be at peace with oneself, to feel loved, and to know that one's story had value. When these three elements are present, the soul rests, and whoever observes it perceives it. It doesn't need great explanations. Just look into the eyes of someone who has reached this point and understand that there is a complete presence there. A soul that doesn't need to prove anything anymore, that has already forgiven itself, that has already understood its place in the world. And that in itself is a silent inheritance that can inspire everyone around, without fanfare, without speeches, just by being who it is. Perhaps that's why many older people develop a different patience. Not the one that comes from resignation, but from awareness. Sylvia said that time teaches that almost everything passes, almost everything calms down, and that few things really matter in the end. Whoever reaches this understanding doesn't live rushing. They live observing, reflecting, absorbing. And that brings a calm that may seem strange to those who are still at the beginning of the journey, but it's a calm that comes from within, from the understanding that life doesn't need to be perfect to be full. The mature soul has learned that meaning is in the connections, in the small joys, in the silent learnings. Therefore, even in the midst of difficulties, many older people exude a serenity that cannot be bought, cannot be taught, only develops with time. It's important that all of us, regardless of age, begin to look at this phase of life with more depth. Sylvia reminded us that the elderly aren't just aging. They are completing a sacred cycle, preparing for a new stage of existence. And in this process, each of our gestures can contribute to making this passage more dignified, more human, more respectful. Sometimes it's enough to listen without haste, ask with genuine interest, or just be present with attention. It's not necessary to solve anything. Just recognize that there is a soul in an advanced state of consciousness there, and this consciousness deserves to be welcomed with the same care that one has with a child who is starting life. Because the end, like the beginning, is also a portal of transformation. For those who are still in the middle of life, hearing these truths may seem distant or even uncomfortable, but that's precisely why they are important. Sylvia said that the sooner we understand the spiritual nature of aging, the better we can prepare ourselves to live with meaning. It's not about anticipating death, but about honoring life in all its phases. Every choice made today impacts the state of the soul tomorrow. And when this understanding becomes clear, our relationships change. We begin to value time differently, to listen more attentively, to care with more presence. The wisdom of the elderly isn't only in what they say, but in what they have already lived. And if we listen with an open heart, this wisdom can also be ours, shared with respect and gratitude. Sylvia Browne, with her spiritual vision, left us this profound invitation to recognize the soul of the elderly as a source of living wisdom, not as something to be idolized, but as something to be heard, welcomed, respected. In a world that lives in a hurry, whoever stops to listen to an older person connects with time in another way. It's as if something inside us also slows down and begins to perceive with more clarity what really matters. This type of listening doesn't require technical effort. It requires humanity. And when this listening happens, a sacred space is created where the soul can express itself freely. And that, for someone who has already lived so much, can be one of the greatest gifts, a silent but immense gift that transforms who gives and who receives. If this content spoke to you at any point, share it, not to increase numbers, but so that more people can see the soul of the elderly with the respect and admiration they deserve. And if you're not yet subscribed, consider joining us. Here, each video is an invitation to listen, to reflect, and to rescue what really has value. Because aging is not a problem to be solved, but a journey to be understood. And when this understanding happens, life becomes clearer, lighter, truer. The soul doesn't need much to flourish, it just needs space, time, and respect. And when that is offered, even in silence, it reveals itself in its purest form. And that is something worth keeping alive. Today, tomorrow, and always.